2 weeks ago, Batullah Shair's family was caught in the crossfire of fighting in Mogadishu. A battle that rages almost daily between Islamic militants and a weak transitional government has taken a heavy toll on her. My brother was killed, my mother was injured, and my husband was shot in the stomach, she says. When we arrived here, he died. She has since lost a child to hunger, a twin to the one she holds. For Shair and her 4 remaining children, survival in this makeshift refugee camp is a daily struggle. Since we got here, she says, we haven't received any food from aid agencies or the UN. For those who managed to escape war, drought is proving just as deadly. It's been 5 years since the rains have fallen in this part of Somalia. Even camels, the most drought-resistant animal, are dying. With the country now mired in an almost endless cycle of fighting, hunger, and drought, more than half the population, 3.8 million people, now rely on food aid to survive. But even that is threatened. Canadian aid remains strong, but overall, humanitarian aid to Somalia has been cut by a quarter because of the global financial crisis, and it could get worse. The U.S., the largest foreign donor here, is suspending donations while it investigates if American food is getting into the hands of the Al-Shabaab militia, a group on Washington's terror list.
The potential damage is huge. If you don't give food in Al-Shabaab areas, that in actuality is over 60% of the people that we do assist.
Fearful of Somalia turning into a new al-Qaeda base, the U.S. has also pumped some 40 tons of arms into the country to prop up the moderate transitional government. For the likes of Shair and her family, the main result is misery. I don't know what the answer is, she says. One day it's safe, the next day fighting starts again. With hunger and drought biting ever harder and weapons pouring in, at best the future for Somalia looks bleak. At worst, a full-blown catastrophe. David McGuffin, CBC News, Galkayo, Somalia. Northern Mali, home to the legendary city of Timbuktu. Beyond its ancient walls, the sands of the Sahara stretch for thousands of kilometers. Daytime temperatures can reach 60 degrees Celsius, a sparse, unforgiving environment now made more deadly by the presence of Al-Qaeda.
It's even maybe the only military base of Al-Qaeda Maghreb which has never been attacked.
Adam Cham was a spokesman for the former president of Mali and is now a leading political columnist.
So we are talking of a region which is maybe twice the size of France, for instance. So it's very difficult for an army, Malian army. Mali is 30,000 militaries, ill-equipped, and with a very poor knowledge of the northern Mali.
A fact confirmed by these local Tuareg nomads. You can travel for 1,400 kilometers north of here. It is wide open. You will never see any security, he says. There is no one to ask for your documents or where you're going. This is some of the most punishing terrain on the face of the earth. It's hot, it's dry, it's lawless. And out there in this vast emptiness, the hostages were held for months. The cell believed to be responsible for holding Fowler and Gay, Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, moved into the region a decade ago, forced out of neighboring Algeria. With no government presence here, they've been able to fill a leadership vacuum. This local elder, his identity hidden for security reasons, has met some of its members.
If you are not very well informed, you can't even know that they are one of those Al-Qaeda people. But they are there and doing their job. And they are very intelligent people, so they know how to get informed and how to get the sympathy of local people.
Mali's president says it's just as much organized crime as Islamic fundamentalism. There is one sort of threat across the whole Saharan Sahel region, from Mauritania to Darfur, he says. The trafficking of arms, the trafficking of men and women. They're trying to bring them through the desert to Europe. It's these people who say they are affiliated with Al-Qaeda. Northern Mali has also become a major transshipment point for drugs. Kidnapping is just the newest lucrative sideline, and one that threatens the region's economic future. If this kidnapping continues, it will change things, he says. No one will come anymore. The people of Timbuktu live on tourism, and if there are no tourists, there will be no work. It will be terrible. Mali has been pushing for more international and regional help to fight the problem, so far with little success.
Liberating the Canadian is good, but liberating also the community will be the best one, because it will benefit for everyone.
But for now, the people of northern Mali themselves remain hostage to an al-Qaeda threat that continues to grow unchecked. David McGuffin, CBC News, Timbuktu.
It was supposed to be an event celebrating Afghanistan's military strength. Instead, it may have underscored its frailty. Scores of dignitaries were forced to flee during a brazen attack by militants yesterday in Kabul. The CBC's David McGuffin has the details from Kandahar.
Well, Suhana, how it happened was apparently 6 Taliban insurgents broke through a very strong cordon of security around this military parade, a military parade that had 3,000 Afghan security forces involved in it. They were apparently able to check into a small motel above the parade ground. From there, they were able to open fire on the dignitaries. Amongst the crowd, there were Western diplomats, including the Canadian ambassador, President Hamid Karzai, senior members of his cabinet. Now, most of these people were able to escape unharmed. There were 3 people killed in this incident. 1 member of parliament, a tribal elder, and a young child were shot by the Taliban. It took about 15 minutes of gun battles between the 2 sides for things to finally get settled. The Taliban claims that they lost 3 people. President Hamid Karzai later went on television. He said that they had captured several insurgents as well. He also tried to reassure the nation that things were now under control. He said to the nation that things were now actually fine, was the words that he used. Certainly a big embarrassment for President Hamid Karzai. This was an effort to showcase a modernizing military, a military that's being modernized with the help of Western countries, NATO, the United Nations. Suhana?
And David, I suppose in many countries, political discussions around the world will be the question, what does this say about the government's ability to maintain security in the capital and then beyond?
Well, that's a very good question, and what it seems to indicate is that the government's having real problems maintaining security in the capital. The Taliban announced that they were going to start focusing on the capital last year. I mean, this is something they said they were going to do, and they have carried out now several high-profile hits. They hit a 5-star hotel in the center of town, killed several foreigners in that attack, and now this attack here. I mean, they were within several hundred yards of the president of Afghanistan with 3,000 troops around them. President Karzai has been very proud of pointing out the fact that most of the security in Kabul now is provided by the Afghan National Army and Afghan security forces. This is certainly going to raise questions about how much they are able to carry out that job when 6 Taliban insurgents are able to get this close and cause this much damage. The Taliban themselves are saying they did this to prove that they can strike anywhere they want. They said they could have killed Hamid Karzai, but that wasn't the point. They wanted to show the world how strong they are and what they can do. Suhana?
That's the CBC's David McGuffin in Kandahar this morning.
Meanwhile, in Kandahar City, Canadian soldiers are trying out something new on their patrols. A risky tactic they hope will win them some crucial new supporters. The CBC's David McGuffin has that story.
All right, boys, coming out of here.
These Canadian soldiers have left their base to meet the neighbors, but this time they've left their heavily armored vehicles behind and are making their way around Kandahar City on foot.
We figure that if we come out here and we get to know the people get to know who we are, they get to know what we're doing, then we're going to win the consent of the people over, and that's key in a counterinsurgency operation.
But make no mistake about it, this is a dangerous mission. The Taliban are known to secretly make bombs nearby. Just last week, a suicide bomber killed 8 Afghans a few hundred meters from here. It's a shift in tactics by an enemy now focusing more on terrorizing the local population.
These Canadian foot patrols in Kandahar City are new. They only began this April. They are very much about reaching out to the local community, but in an area that's seen more than its fair share of suicide bombings, they are also about security. But Canadian soldiers are also Taliban targets, of course, and already these foot patrols have paid off.
There's some locals in an area that we were visiting on that first patrol found an IED that was placed right near where we were actually having a meeting, and they phoned it in through the local security.
Still, there's a wariness amongst Afghans who watch the Canadians walk past. Not surprising in a region where the Taliban kill people seen as cooperating with coalition forces. We were shocked that Canadians were walking through here on a foot patrol, he says. At first we were scared because we thought they were here to check our houses. But these patrols are good.
We've been doing a lot of work with the municipal government, with the mayor.
Part of what Sergeant Dawson does is to gauge what improvements Canada can help with in the area. Fix roads, dig ditches, dig wells.
There's a disconnect between the people and the local government, and we're trying to bridge that.
It may not be glamorous work, but in a war where the enemy remains elusive, something as simple as getting to know your neighbors may make a huge difference. David McGuffin, CBC News, Kandahar. Nairobi's Kibera slum, just one of several flashpoints in this second day of anti-government protests. Riot police charged at protesters in this hotbed of opposition support. With demonstrations banned, police asked few questions and handed out rough justice. This woman says police threw tear gas into her home, leaving her baby unconscious. Why did they do this, she asks. Why are they attacking children? The protests again today aren't large, but they are violent on both sides of the equation. And they are effectively shutting down the cities in the country, which appears to be the opposition's main goal now. The protesters want to force President Kibaki to resign, saying his election victory was rigged, and charge the government is using unreasonable force to stay in power. Demonstrators accuse the police of firing live ammunition.
They're shooting us. They have already shot one guy, died.
These men show spent rounds. They say they're from live bullets being used by police. And the opposition says those bullets have claimed several lives. It is certain that the levels of violence in urban centers remains high. Today, the European Parliament voted to freeze aid to Kenya. Canada was one of 14 countries that warned it may do the same if the situation continues to worsen. The government says it won't bow to threats.
You cannot threaten a sovereign nation that they have to behave in a certain way, whereas it is actually the opposition who are the ones going out in the streets to cause the violence, not the government.
The opposition has promised more protests tomorrow. And with the political stalemate in the country far from resolved, many here fear that the violence unleashed will become harder to contain with every passing day. David McGuffin, CBC News, Nairobi.
Like to play ball.
For Regina Plachis, resident in the poor Cliptown neighborhood of Soweto, life under the African National Congress has been a letdown.
Nothing has changed here. Let me tell you like this, I think it's getting worse.
Unemployed, a single mother of two, Plachis has listened to 15 years of ANC promises and has little to show for it.
We don't have electricity. Families, one toilet, it's very unhealthy. And we've got this dirty water running in the streets, which is very, very unhealthy. And poverty, we are suffering very much.
The ANC adopted its Freedom Charter in Cliptown 54 years ago. It's even built this sprawling, expensive monument on the edge of the slum in commemoration. It practically taunts the residents. For 30-year-old Samuel Scott, that was the final straw.
But I just feel to vote for another party because I've been voting for the ANC before, but I'm still living in this place and I'm still suffering.
He's not alone. Opposition parties like the Congress of the People, or COPE, which split off from the ANC, have built strong support on the ruling party's failures to deliver to South Africa's poor. The crowd at this COPE rally in the Western Cape is made up almost entirely of people that have consistently voted for the ANC in the past. But they say after 15 years in power, South Africa's Liberation Party no longer represents their interests.
I've been voting for ANC from '94. Now is the time for me to change to COPE because I know COPE will do the things I need. I never benefit from the ANC.
You know, they've got nice policies, but the problem is a matter of implementation. Hence, we are saying it's about time we need change.
Analysts say the ANC's record on helping South Africa's poor has been mixed.
Clearly, we could have done far more on electricity, on water, on sanitation. There is a question mark that there has been politically connected black entrepreneurs have benefited sufficiently, and some of us would argue at the expense of poor, marginalized people.
Despite this, Regina Platjes says she will again cast her vote for the ANC, pegging her hopes on the new party leader, Jacob Zuma.
He promises us all these things, so we just look in his direction now.
That kind of faith will almost certainly guarantee the ANC another election victory on Wednesday. But if the result is 5 more years of empty promises, even the Regina Platjes of this country may decide enough is enough. David McGuffin, CBC News, Kliptown, South Africa.
We want to introduce you tonight to Peter Ash. He's a Canadian on a life-saving mission in Africa. He's working to help Tanzanians targeted for the color of their skin, hair, and eyes. Albinos are frequently attacked, their body parts seen as valuable for witch doctors. David McGuffin followed Ash on a recent visit to Tanzania as he tried to make a difference.
Tanzania is unique in this part of Africa. Peaceful, largely crime-free. It's avoided the tribal conflict and political upheaval that has shaken more notorious neighbors like Kenya, Uganda, and Rwanda. But lurking beneath this sunny exterior is a dark secret, one that is only now coming into the open: the ritual murder and dismemberment of Tanzania's albinos. Saidi Abdallah is just one of the latest victims.
Nahisi walitaka ambao wamenizuru na kuchukua, wanataka ambao wapate manufaa yao kwa jinsi wanavyozungumza kwamba marubino.
We met Saidi in hiding at his sister's house in a village just 2 hours from Tanzania's largest city, Dar es Salaam. The arm he lost in the machete attack by 2 men at his farm was likely sold to a witch doctor, used in a potion. The going price for an albino arm is $2,000. An entire body can fetch $250,000.
People butchered apart alive.
For Canadian Peter Ash, changing this reality has become a personal crusade.
Albinos are not evil. They are not a curse. They're not from the devil. They are God's children.
This open-air church service in Dar es Salaam is just one of the venues Ash, an albino himself, is working on his latest mission to Tanzania. Ash is a millionaire Vancouver businessman and former Baptist minister. But most importantly for Tanzania's albinos, he's their loudest and boldest defender. For the past 2 years, through his organization under the same sun, Ash has been working towards one goal: ending the slaughter of Tanzanian albinos.
It's dehumanizing, right? That's why I had to get involved here. I mean, I couldn't imagine if someone tried to break into my home and, you know, attacked my son in the middle of the night, or came after me and wanted to chop my arm off. It's a complete dehumanization.
Many Tanzanians don't see albinos as human. They're called ghosts, demons, believed to be magical. And since 2007, there have been over 60 documented attacks on albinos. Most of them were killed, their bodies chopped up and sold like meat. Only a week after the attack on him, Saidi agreed to take us to the site. It was his first time returning since his arm was cut off.
Nahisi jamaa mzara huyu na jamaa watu wa polini lao moja kwa sababu bado mimi na mashaka na yeye.
It's quiet at the farm, but the memories are raw.
Ghafla tu nasikia watu wa Kimasai wametokea huko ambao mulani. Bwana mzungu, tunaomba tumbaku. Wasomalia wema, umeona eh? Nikachuchumaa kama hivi. Umeona? Kwa sababu mtu anapokustukiza au sio bwana? Uwezi ujua. Nasikia kwamba kasituka pia ni kama kastukiza hivi yani. Nika nguka chini, piga tena. Ndio? Alafu kapiga tena hapa. Umeona eh? Ghafla mmefahamu hizo kupotea pale. Kupotea. Uzinduka tu ghafla ndio anakuta mkono hamna. Washachukua. 10.
It's believed the albino gene first occurred in Tanzania. The rate for albinism is 10 times higher here than in most countries. Even without the ritual attacks and murders, the life of an African albino is short and painful. Tanzanian oncologist Dr. Jeff Luende is one of the world's foremost experts on albinism.
They have a genetic defect which makes them unable to manufacture melanin, which is the black color. When they get exposed to sunlight from when they're young, they damage their skin over time. The skin is so unhealthy that it starts forming cancers, and they die of cancer.
Most albinos here are dead by age 30. Stigmatized, marginalized, attacked. It's a brutal life. As a child, Ash himself experienced teasing and beatings, but his first visit to Tanzania in 2008 gave him a personal taste of how much worse it is here.
Colleagues on the bus told me that they overheard people walking by or driving by on the downtown streets in Mwanza shout out upon seeing us, "Deal, deal." This is a phrase that's commonly used in certain parts of Tanzania when persons with albinism walk down streets. In other words, if I were to kill you and get your body parts, I could make a deal. I could get a lot of money. So deal, deal has almost become a descriptive phrase or a name for albinos. That you are a deal. If I chopped you up and sold you, I'd be wealthy.
A recent survey found that 93% of Tanzanians believe in witchcraft. That was the highest rate of any country polled around the world. Just here in Mwanza district by Lake Victoria, there are an estimated 3,000 registered witch doctors.
Poverty-stricken and deeply superstitious. In terms of albino attacks, Mwanza is ground zero. It was seeing this undercover report by the BBC from Mwanza that first prompted Ash to act.
Sasa kama mimi siwezi, manake sitaweza kufanya hiyo kazi. Kwa sababu si unajua mimi mwanamke.
Sasa namna ya na kuyaua na kupata vile nani. Yapo kwenye miji. Kwenye miji ya watu. Si anazaliwa kwenye miji ya watu.
Ash now makes frequent trips to Tanzania, visiting victims, meeting politicians, raising awareness in the country.
We don't want these people to just become numbers in a news story, that X number of people have been killed. These are little boys and little girls. These are men and women who, due to no fault of their own, only because of the color of their skin, are being butchered.
Today, he's visiting survivors of a recent attack.
And I have to say that you and your children are just absolutely beautiful.
Napendeza.
And I know sometimes as a person with albinism, maybe you haven't heard that very often.
No, I haven't heard that comment before. This is the first time.
Rukia tells a story that is all too familiar.
Saa 3 ya usiku mtoto alikuwa na upele hapo kwenye nywele, nikamnyoa hapa, nikampakaza dawa. Sasa nilivyotoka kutoka nje ninayo mikono ili nikalale, ndio mtu asiyojulikana nisiyomjua akatokea nyuma huko, akafikia kupiga mgongoni kwa mtoto nilikombeba.
She shows the machete scars her baby suffered. Neighbors came to their rescue.
Kwa kweli watu wananiona kama mtu wa kawaida tu, kama ni binadamu mwenzao. Ila baada ya kutokea tukio hili, kusikia bara huko marubino wanauawa nini, ndio wakaanza na mimi kupita pita kunitisha tu. Hapa kuna dili, hapa kuna hela.
She now lives in fear. Her daughter has stopped going to school. Under the same sun, we'll try to get the family to a more secure location and the eldest daughter into a boarding school. In all, they aim to get some 150 albino children into school this year. But on some levels, the results from Ash's advocacy have been disappointing. The government still largely treats the issue as an embarrassment it would rather ignore. Albino attacks are handled with wariness by the legal system.
There's clearly only been 2 cases of the 55 murders that have been prosecuted through the courts to the extent that a conviction was handed down. So there's still 53 murder cases that have not reached conviction, and 6 other attacks that didn't result in death that haven't reached conviction. So, I mean, it's a fraction. It took us, 2 years to get 2 convictions. So the wheels of justice seem to be grinding quite slowly.
Vicky Entertainment is the journalist who filmed the BBC's undercover story. She now works for Under the Same Sun. She's received death threats from within the Tanzanian government for her efforts.
Mobile phone. The last warning actually came also from a police officer, and it's not just a police officer, but a high-ranking police officer, saying that if I continue to write and broadcast stories on albino killings and witch doctors, the witch doctors will kill me.
In Mwanza, Ash visits a family whose story deeply moved him when he read about it last year. In June 2009, 22-year-old Jessica Charles was kidnapped and murdered coming home from a church social. Her mother still can't talk about it. Her father had to identify the remains.
Mwili tuliukuta umekatwa mikono yote begani na miguu kukatia hapa.
So they've traumatized an entire family forever because of their selfishness and their greed. And I feel angry. I can't understand the evil that would motivate someone to do something like this.
She was sold out by her fiancé. Relatives are often involved in the killings, sacrificing loved ones for profit. With Ash, Jessica's father visits the gravesite.
Our Father in heaven, we ask your blessing on Charles, and also your special blessing on Esther. Their hearts are breaking today. And today we give thanks for the life of Jessica. In your name, amen.
After 2 years of visits and lobbying, the attacks still continue, but Ash sees progress.
Come to the rescue. And this is one thing I think our campaign is resulting in. One trend we've noticed in the last year is we're hearing several cases now of attacks without death. 6 of them, right? Which, although discouraging, the attacks are continuing. The fact that they're not all being killed, and almost always the reason is that villagers come to the rescue. And so that tells me there's a current of good people in Tanzania who are saying enough is enough.
For now, that gives hope enough to keep this Canadian albino fighting for his brothers and sisters here under the African sun. David McGuffin, CBC News, Mwanza, Tanzania.
Well, since David visited Tanzania, there's been one more conviction, and we spoke to Peter Ash today. So far this year, his group has put 100 at-risk children into safe boarding schools.